My name is Lena Ashooh. I am a graduate student at Oxford in the Faculty of Philosophy, but I wrote this paper while I was still an undergraduate student at Harvard University. I wrote this paper with Rébecca Kleinberger. I'm a member of Rébecca's Interact Animal Lab at Northeastern University, which is another capacity within which I wrote this paper. The title of the paper is What is an Animal Anyways? From Essentialism to Social Construction through research on ACI. These are the paper's main claims. The style of the intervention that Rébecca and I make in this paper resembles interventions that have been made by theorists of gender, race, and disability who work at the meeting of theory and practice and observe that there are delays between work that is being done in theory and conceptions that are used in practice, such as in research, and attempt to address those delays by offering devices that are both theoretically sound and applicable to practice, such as to research. This is the sort of intervention that Rébecca and I wanted to make in this paper, and it's one of our goals. This will be the structure of the presentation. We started our paper by noting something interesting. Changing technologies can come with changed concepts. It's worthwhile thinking about what this means. We can wonder if changed technologies come with changed beliefs about concepts, such as changed beliefs about what money looks like, or if those concepts actually do change. For example, as currency changed and entered a realm of something like digital currency, the concept actually changed. But some examples are work. Work changed as remote work or teleworking was introduced. Our understanding of what cancer is changed with the introduction of new technologies like microscope technologies, where cancer became abnormal cell growth. We list some other examples here and discuss them a little bit in the paper. We then observed that research in ACI has produced new understandings of concepts like welfare, evaluation, wearability, and participatory design. And this is as animals have been taken seriously as users, participants, and beneficiaries of design. This latter little tacked on observation is important here because it'll become relevant to later parts of the presentation. We then introduce the possibility, which is the driving thesis of our emerging works paper, that research in ACI has the potential to transform an even more fundamental concept than the ones that we listed on the previous slide. It can transform our concept of what an animal is. And it's important to note that this is not just a possibility, something to entertain, but we defend in this paper that it has implications for research practice, so can be ethically significant. In our background, we discuss one potential story about the origins of systems of classification that may be used in ACI research, which we root in the Linnaean taxonomic classification system. One helpful observation, however, that can motivate the thought that our concepts of animal categories can change is the observation that there exists an abundance of systems of classification that could be used to classify living beings. We mentioned some examples in our paper. I include some of them here on this slide. It's important to notice that these systems of classification can differ depending on the purpose that they serve. But we in our paper lay out one method of classification, the Linnaean taxonomic system of classification, not so much to commit ourselves to saying that this is definitively the method of classification that is used in ACI and is where our ideas about what animal categories are come from, but because we thought it might be useful for those thinking about their methods of classification. And we thought maybe seeing this method of classification detailed could make people realize which and which not elements reflect the concepts of animal categories that they use and that may exist underneath their research. Regardless of whether the origins of the methods of classification that are used in ACI have been correctly identified, we introduce a concept which we define and hopefully can make it easier to think about our methods of classification, which we call the natural theory of animal classification. In our paper, we actually call it the essential or biological species concept. I prefer this general term on the slide here. But the idea is that our terms, like the term animal, chimpanzee, dog, etc., refer to a designation in a natural hierarchy, where that designation in the hierarchy determines other abilities and qualities and features, such as an animal's personality, intelligence, capacities, and so on. I note at the end of this section, which I think is important, that this method of classification has connections to racial science, and in particular a view called polygenism. The father of racial science believed that species groups had separate creations and therefore completely different essences, which then determined associated qualities. And he extended this view, which was rooted in his training in zoology, to human racial groups. Given the claim that I made at the start of the paper, and which I said would become relevant throughout the presentation, these concepts are not trivial and have practical and ethical importance. And I think these connections to racial science are important to comment on. I then introduced the natural alternative to the biological or essential animal categories concept, which is the social construction concept. On this view, our animal categories pick out, at least in part, a social designation and a group formed through social forces, such as through laws, policies, perceptions, social meanings, and social roles and treatment. So to give one example, on this view, an animal is who is on the table as humans are around it. The social construction account I hope to be the most helpful and primary contribution of this paper to practitioners in ACI. I think it can help ACI researchers consider additional questions that the natural or biological approach does not. In the process I propose here in this paper, it can improve the accuracy and validity of research results. I test out these claims using a few case studies. The thought is that if you observe the social arrangements that affect, often in a patterned way, the lives, behaviors, and abilities of animals, you might be able to make more valid claims about them and the causes of their behavior, and how changes in their environment, including their technological reality, could affect them. In the methods section, I present definitions that could guide this sort of analysis, and I hope are usable to others who want to introduce the social construction account in their research. These include these definitions here. I also include a definition of what I mean when I talk about animal categories. But the two most important definitions are these, which we've already discussed, but are detailed here. Again, my hypothesis is that the social construction concept of animal categories can improve the accuracy of ACI research and has moral, ethical, and political implications. So, i.e., is not trivial. The two case studies that I present are in demographics collection and reporting in ACI and in design. In my first case study, I show that the employment of the social construction account of animal categories could encourage the collection of additional information about research participants that could help researchers derive more valid or accurate conclusions. I introduce as well the possibility that thinking in these terms, in social construction terms, could prompt the employment of a more robust demographics collection system in ACI, which would be beneficial to ACI research. The second case study focuses on design and looks at how the concepts of animal categories that we employ can shape the sorts of questions and challenges and approaches to design that we use when it comes to design in ACI. I have one specific case study where I look at this, which had to do with a captive gorilla and attributions of the gorilla's behavior to the gorillas as a whole, innate essence, rather than the conditions within that one specific gorilla lived. And I consider some of the moral implications of using one concept of animal categories over another, particularly the biological concept over the social construction concept. And at the end of this case study, I conclude that the social construction concept, had it been employed, could have opened new avenues for research and new design possibilities. After these two case studies and some of the meditation that Rébecca and I engaged in at the start of the paper, we come to these few points in our summary. Concepts can condition research praxis. There's good room for thinking at the intersection of theory and praxis, particularly in ACI. The essential species concept can be contrasted with what we call the social construction concept, and this can influence ACI research praxis and particularly open doors for ACI. And at the end of the paper, the concluding thought is that the moral implications and the positive benefits of the social construction concept to ACI research should make engaging with and using the social construction concept an intentional part, an intentional focus of ACI research. That's the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you very much.